What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Warden Healer. So the Warden Healer is still going to be one of the strongest healing classes in the game right now. They already were one of the stronger healer specs in the game, but a couple of changes to one of their abilities, Fetcher Infection, has really brought up Warden Healers to pretty much, I would argue to say, almost a must-have in a group. While you can replace the utility that a Warden Healer provides by, for example, bringing in a Warden in a different role, the Warden probably fits the healer spec best, just in terms of the types of buffs and debuffs that it's able to provide via its class abilities. So definitely a strong spec, one of the strongest healers in the game. You will typically see a lot of endgame groups running a Templar healer and a Warden healer in order to combine their strengths and sort of offset some of their weaknesses by pairing them together. Just like the rest of our build videos, we will not be going over any gear in this video. All that is going to be reserved for a healer gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right hand corner right now. So if you want to know what gear I am running, as well as any other gear sets that you might want to pick up as a healer, I recommend pausing this video, checking out the healer gear video, and then coming back here. This video will be going over just the skills, as well as what sets Warden healers apart from other classes, and the philosophy behind healing. So let's go ahead and get started with our front bar, which is our restoration staff. So we have illustrious healing. You can go with the other morph of illustrious healing if you would like. Typically speaking, you won't necessarily need the extra sustain from healing springs. So illustrious healing is, generally speaking, going to be the better option just because it provides significantly more healing done. So definitely the stronger option instead of healing springs. Next we have Comet Prayer for the Minor Berserk. Definitely pretty much a standard and almost necessary buff for endgame PvE healers to run. Then we have Enchanted Growth, which acts both as a burst heal, an AoE burst heal, and it also provides minor intellect and minor endurance, basically improving overall group DPS sustain. So pretty important to have that there. Then we have Energy Orb for the heal and the combustion synergy for the additional resources. And then we have Fetcher Infection. This doesn't have to be on the front bar. This can be on the back bar. It really depends on where you want to put it. If there's any other ability that you need to run on the front bar, for example. Fetcher Infection, for one, it kind of serves three purposes. First purpose is it counts as a dot if you are running Zen's Redress. The second purpose is just to deal just raw damage. And the third purpose is to apply minor vulnerability. So Fetcher Infection now applies minor vulnerability for the duration of the dot. So it's probably the most reliable way to get minor vulnerability now, outside of using a set like Infallible Aether or using the Nightblade's Teleport Strike. So 10-second minor vulnerability, so you can pretty much drop IA now from healers and you can run a different set instead. So definitely a welcome change to the Warden's toolkits, and like I alluded to earlier, one of the reasons why I believe Warden healers are going to be staples in a lot of endgame groups. Then we have Eternal Guardian, which we will not be using, obviously, for damage. You're only single barring this. This is mainly because we have a passive under the Animal Companions line called Flourish, which provides an additional 12% magic regen while we have an Animal Companion ability slotted. So we do have an Animal Companion ability slotted with Fetcher Infection, but if you have this on the back bar and you have something like Radiant Regeneration or Healing Ward on the front bar, you'll still be able to get the 12% Magicka regen that way. Now for our back bar, which is the Lightning Staff bar, we have Elemental Drain. You might not necessarily need to run this. Typically speaking, only one healer is required to run Elemental Drain, so you can replace this with another ability. And we have Blockade of Storms for the off-balance uptime and enchant procs on your back bar. We have Budding Seeds, which acts as another AoE burst heal, provides a unique harvest synergy to help with Lakesti's Major Slayer uptime and Alkosh uptime on tanks, and also provides an additional heal over time as well. So you can see here it heals for 1120 health every second for the 6 seconds while it's blooming, and then it finishes off with that burst 9767 health to everybody within the circle. So very powerful healing tool here. You will have to double click this if you want this to instantly bloom and just get the immediate AoE heal, so it's a little bit unreliable for that. So it's mainly there just to kind of set and forget. It's pretty much, you can pretty much treat it as a healing springs or Illustrious Healing. Then we have Expansive Frost Cloak for major resolve to the group. So if your group doesn't need the major resolve, then you can replace this with another ability, but it is definitely a very good skill to have. It just helps boost overall DPS survivability. Not all DPS specs will have access to major resolve, so it's always nice to be able to provide this for your DPS. Then finally we have Blue Betty for the Magicka Return that it provides. It also provides major sorcery as well, so if you don't want to run spell power potions, you can just run Blue Betty, although you would be losing out on the major prophecy from spell power potions, so I personally would not recommend doing that. Plus, Blue Betty also cleanses one negative effect off of you every 5 seconds, so you have a little bit of a self-purge here. That is limited, it's rate limited to every 5 seconds, but even a 5-second purge is still useful because it is essentially free. And finally, we have Aggressive Warhorn as our support ultimates with that major force for 10 seconds. Now in terms of other abilities you might want to have on hand, not much here from the Animal's Companions line. There is an argument for Deceptive Predator for the minor evasion as well as the major expedition. So you could run that if you need this movement speed or you need the additional survivability, but it's not really going to be necessary in any real fights. There are some very niche cases where you would want to use it, but you typically will not be running this ability here. Another green balance line, if you need an ultimate burst heal that's pretty cheap, you can go with Enchanted Forest here. So really cheap ultimate here, 90 ultimate, and it has a nice heal over time as well as a burst heal right away. So pretty strong healing ultimate here. The primary advantage this has over the Templar healing ultimate is it is a set and forget kind of ultimate versus the channeled ultimate that the Templars have. Plus it's cheaper than a Templar ultimate. It doesn't heal quite as much, but that's not really necessary when you're able to pump out more of these. From there, you have Leaching Vines, which applies minor lifesteal. You can also run Living Trellis instead. However, it's better to get minor lifesteal from Blood Altar versus Leaching Vines, just because Blood Altar lasts for a longer period of time and also provides a synergy as well. Lotus Blossom is going to be the morph of choice if you're going to run this ability. So this just lets your light attacks and heavy attacks restore certain health to new or nearby allies. Not very reliable. I would not really rely on this skill to kind of heal through the group because it only heals one person at a time and it is reliant on light weaving. So I personally would not recommend running Lotus Blossom as a healer. It's just not reliable enough, not fast enough to heal multiple people up at once. Then we have Nature's Grasp, Nature's Embrace, and Bursting Vines. Both of these are pretty good options here. However, I personally prefer Bursting Vines because it is a burst heal compared to Nature's Embrace, which is a heal over time. You can make arguments for both, but again, I find Bursting Vines to be better because sometimes you want that burst heal going. There are some use cases for Bursting Vines. You gain ultimate as well when you use it, so it's always nice to be able to get more ultimate going, so that way you can use your Warhorns faster to get better major force uptime. Moving on to Winter's Embrace, not much under Winter's Embrace here. You can run Northern Storm for the major protection that it provides, as well as Permafrost. It really depends on which morph you'd like. Northern Storm will give you some additional magicka though if you activate it, so that's usually the morph that you will want to go for. The major protection could be very useful. It is centered on you, and so could be nice for sort of AoE major protection in execute fights. Moving on to Destro Staff Bar, you might want to pick up Crushing Shock as a ranged interrupt. Always nice to have that option there. Under the Restoration Staff line, you have Radiant Regeneration, which acts as a pretty nice heal over time. And then Healing Ward, which you're not going to be using too often because you have already several burst heals that are really strong. You're really going to be using Healing Ward in conjunction with the Black Rose Prison Staff. So not really an ability you will be using very often, but when you will use it, it's going to be pretty strong. If you ever need a shield, you can run either Morph of Annulment, Harness Magicka, or Dampen Magic. Doesn't really matter which one you choose, so you can either pick a Restore Magic or Larger Shield. If you are running Zens, you will want to pick up a couple of single target dots, so Fetter Infection, Soul Trap, as well as under the Major Skilled Line Degeneration. Those are 3 single target dots you will typically be able to run, which will be able to provide at least some utility. So Degeneration will give you some extra Magicka and Magicka regen, so always a potential good thing there. Again, only if you're running Zen. Under the Fighter Skilled line, Ring Preservation provides minor protection and a small heal as well. So very similar to Northern Storm, really strong when you have to stack up for any sort of execute mechanic or anything like that. So for example, Lakesti's Hard Mode, usually you will not be running Ring Preservation. Usually it's going to be a Stamina DPS, but it's nice to have this option here. Under the Psijic Order line, Mend Wounds, either Morph, Symbiosis, or Mend Spirit have the potential to be one of the strongest HPS in the game. So it basically replaces your light and heavy attacks with a healing attack, so you will not be able to light weave against the enemy anymore, but instead your light attacks and heavy attacks will heal whoever you have targeted. So like I said, one of the strongest HPS moves in the game right now. HPS is not really a statistic that you should be very concerned about as a healer, but it is pretty useful in a pinch. Make sure to have all the abilities unlocked under the Undaunted skill tree, so you want to have Overflowing Altar because it provides a larger Blood Feast synergy, as well as the Minor Lifesteal. You want Shadow Silk for the Black Widow synergy. In a rage, you will need a range taunt. There are some fights and some strategies that involve the healer taunting thing, so just make sure to have this unlocked. Bone Surge for the Major Vitality synergy that it provides, so useful in places like Cloudrest against Baneful Mark to help heal things up faster. Then obviously Energy Orb for the heal and combustion synergy. Finally, under the Alliance 1 line, if you need to purge multiple people in the group, then you're going to want to run Efficient Purge. You can also run Reviving Barrier, which provides out a shield as well as a heal over time to anybody who's hit by the shield. The advantage of running Barrier is you also can get up to 10% additional Magicka regen with the Magicka Aid passive, so you're not giving up too much by running Barrier versus the Bear ultimate. And that pretty much covers all the skills you're going to want to have. So pretty much to sum it up, all the abilities on the front bar are pretty much you want these abilities here. Fetter Infection can be placed on the back bar if you need it there. And then for the ultimate, you can run Eternal Guardian, Enchanted Forest, or Reviving Barrier. Then on the back bar, if you don't need to run Ellie Drain, you can swap this out with any of the other abilities I mentioned. The 3 abilities you do want to definitely have always are going to be Blockade for the enchant procs and the off balance, Budding Seeds for the heal over time, and as well as the burst heal and the unique synergy, and then Blue Betty for your Magicka sustain. Expansive Frostcloak can be dropped for some other ability if you want to. Then obviously make sure to have Aggressive Warhorn on at least one of your bars for the major force. So now that we've covered all of the skills, now let's talk about healing. So first, what sets Wardens apart from the other classes in the game? Well, we already talked about one of them, and that's the fact that you have Minor Vulnerability. There's only one other class that's able to provide Minor Vulnerability as consistently as the Warden, and that's going to be the Nightblade through Teleport Strike. Nightblades have a little bit of an edge because one of the morphs, Lotus Fan I believe, provides AoE Minor Vulnerability. So if you're running a Nightblade tank, then you might not need to run Fetter Infection, at which point it might be more beneficial to swap out the Warden Healer for something else. That being said, Nightblade tank, while it is becoming more popular in endgame PvE content, is not something that you would typically be seeing run in something like a progression guild. So you will usually be running Fetter Infection for the Minor Vulnerability versus having a Nightblade tank provided for you. Another major advantage that Wardens have, compared to a few other classes, not all, is the fact that they have a unique synergy through Harvest. So other classes that have something like this would be, for example, the Templars with the Purify synergy with Extended Ritual, and Sork Healers with Liquid Lightning, which provides the Conduit synergy. But Budding Seeds, compared to Templar and Sorks, this is unique only to Warden Healers. So a Magicka DPS, Magicka Sorcerer DPS could run Liquid Lightning or Lightning Flood, so that provides Conduit that way. Stamina Templars will usually be running Ritual of Retribution, which also provides the Purify synergy. Versus Magicka Warden DPS will typically never run Budding Seeds. So this is the only way to get this Budding Seed synergy. So every unique synergy just helps Lakesti's uptime. So that's Major Slayer for your Stamina DPS, as well as Alkosh uptimes for your tank. And additionally, you also help provide major resolve to the group. So always nice to have. Not all DPS specs will spec to have major resolve, so this helps improve overall group survivability, which does really make an impact on DPS. And just because they're dying less often, so you don't have to res them as often. And then you're also providing minor intellect and minor endurance. You're one of the only sources of these two buffs, so it's always nice to get that additional regen in order to help out DPS sustain. And then finally, as if we can't even get even more benefits from running a Warden Healer, Green Balance has a minor toughness, first of all, which helps out survivability by giving you more health. But you also get accelerated growth, which gives you major mending. So it's very short, it's only 3 seconds, but Warden Healers have a consistent source of major mending, even though it is limited to having to heal somebody who's under 40% health. So Templar healers can't have this, Sword healers can't have this. The only other healer spec in the game that has major mending on demand is going to be DK healers. So your healing output is going to be a little bit higher than expected because you can get that major mending buff. So Wardens, very strong, a lot of group buffs, hence why I think that Wardens are pretty much a staple for any raid group in ESO. So talking about raiding, how is healing in raiding? So for those of you guys who are coming over from other MMOs, you might be aware of a statistic known as healing per second, or healing done per second. In ESO, while that is a statistic you kind of want to be a little bit cognizant of, it's not something you should be focusing on. The hallmark of a good healer in ESO is the ability to support your DPS. Both tanks and healers, your primary job is obviously to tank and heal respectively, but your secondary job is to help buff DPS by providing different buffs and debuffs. So a lot of these will be coming from skills and sets that you're wearing. So for example, Major Courage comes from the Olorime set. You have Minor Berserk from Comet Prayer. You get Minor Vulnerability from Fetter Infection. You can provide additional sustain by running Orbs, or Worm, or Hircine, or Hollow's Fang's Thirst, for example. And so all that helps improve overall group DPS, which allows you to kill things faster, which in turn basically means there's less of a chance of people to die. So while it might seem a little bit counterintuitive or kind of convoluted, helping improve group DPS does actually make your job easier because the less time is spent on a fight, the less time you need to heal things. Obviously, you still want to be able to heal things up. So if people are dying left and right on your watch, then you're not doing the primary job of a healer, which is to heal things. But you will find in ESO that it's actually quite easy to end up overhealing in this game, and a lot of healers kind of take a look at their HPS and say, oh, I'm doing a very good job at healing, but a lot of them also don't realize that a lot of that HPS is going to waste because you're healing people who are already at full health who don't need the additional healing. So instead of focusing on healing, you should be focusing on buffing and debuffing. So what a lot of endgame healers do is first, it does take some time to kind of learn fight mechanics, getting used to the group and other strategies and things like that. But the kind of core concept behind healing in ESO is to get enough healing done to cover everybody so that way they don't die. You don't necessarily need to make sure they're always at full health, but you do want to make sure that you do have HOTS layered down on the ground. So for example, you have Budding Seeds, you have Illustrious Healing or Radiant Regeneration. It'll help cover your healing, and then the rest of the time you should be trying to manage buffs and debuffs. So things like Blockade for the enchants and Comet Prayer. Just keep an eye on the Minor Berserk buff there. So one of the advantages is that a lot of these buffs and debuffs are tied to healing abilities. So for example, the resource return from Orbs is obviously tied to Orbs, which does heal. Minor Berserk is tied to Comet Prayer, which has a burst heal. Minor Intellect, Minor Endurance is tied to Enchanting Growth, which has a heal. So it's actually quite easy to both heal and buff because a lot of these abilities are tied together. So I am not typically a healer whenever I do raids. There are a few VODs that I have on my YouTube channel where I have healed. They're usually going to be on a Templar, not usually on a Warden, but I might have 1 or 2 videos on my YouTube channel kind of looking at Warden Healer. What I would recommend, if you guys have any questions specifically about healing, is to pop into any of the 4 content creators that I have down below. Those 4 content creators are full-time healers. They are healer mains. So I do recommend checking those guys out and asking any questions on their Twitch channels whenever they're streaming or on their YouTube channel if they have one. They're just a lot better. They're better equipped to answer some of the more detailed healing questions than I am. But that concludes this video. If you guys have any questions at all about this build or healing in general, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, or like I mentioned earlier, jump into one of those 4 content creators' Twitch channels or YouTube channels and ask there. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.